This is not my home, sadly, but en route between a speaking job and working on Alan, I stayed in this cottage, complete with a kitchen. So, welcome to Not My Kitchen. Now, in the last episode, when I was talking to you about the North Pole and about why no one has skied there for a very long time, I was teasing about where the direction of my channel was going to travel. And of course, the answer is, I think we all probably knew deep down, I'm starting a cookery channel. No. Instead, what I am going to do is take you down a small path of polar and expedition culinary excellence. And the idea that I came up with was that I was going to set up a sort of mini playlist, a mini series, talking to you about expedition packet meals. Now, I've talked to you about things like flapjack before, and of course we all know that on expeditions it's common to eat things like nuts and chocolate and so on, and I've probably gone on about that a little bit in the past. But packet meals, the things that you eat at the beginning and the end of the day, so in the morning normally something sort of porridgey or muesli-esque, and then in the evening something that looks a bit more like a normal meal. Now, there's been some history with packet meals, and by packet meals I of course mean the sort that are dehydrated, either just dehydrated or actually freeze-dried, which is a slightly different process. And the reason that you do that, of course, is that when you're on snow or ice, you have access to moisture, to water all around you, and weight is a major constraint. And so what you do not want to do is carry around a load of water, and so that's why you don't take out what they used to call boil in the bag or ready to go meals, which have already been fully hydrated, because otherwise you'll be hauling around dozens of kilograms of water for no reason. So of course what they do is give you dry meals, which you then pour boiling water into, leave it for 5, normally nearer 10 minutes, it then puffs up, rehydrates, softens, and you can then eat it, and it's supposed to taste something akin to a real meal. Now, a long time ago, when I first started out doing this sort of thing, there was a market for these sorts of ready-made expedition meals. There were a few companies making them. They were famously not good, and I won't name names, but some of them really were barely edible. And things really have come on actually quite a long way in the last sort of 5-10 years. I am going to name and not shame, but actually big up this company, Firepot. I think this is their old design before they realised that all the packet meals have orange as their colour scheme, and so they've now gone yellow. But they actually decided to put taste at the forefront of things, as well as good nutritional value, calorie density, and all the other things that we need in order to not just survive on an expedition, but stay relatively happy. Because remember, this is going to be some of your only morale, aside from the conversational excellence of your teammates throughout a really long journey. And on this episode, I'm just going to give you an introduction to a couple of ideas that might interest you. I'm then going to do a number more as the series goes on with particular recipes that I've come up with. But importantly, and I know that some of the companies that have made good businesses making these sorts of expedition foods in the past might be slightly cross at me, but you probably noticed as well as I have, they're really, really expensive. Some of these can cost 10, 11, 12 pounds per packet, and often the portion size is simply not sufficient for a large male human being doing a huge amount of work on the trail. And so often what you need to do is sort of decant them or have 1.5 or even 2 packets for a meal, and then that starts going up towards 15, 20 quid a meal, which when we're talking about relatively straightforward ingredients here is a bit of a piss take. If you are just going away for a long weekend, then it does make sense to order online or just go to the local outdoor store and buy 2 or 3 of these things. But if you're going away for a proper expedition, multi-days, multi-weeks, multi-months, and you're doing things in bulk, this really will make a big difference. And of course, you can have control over exactly what calories, exactly what flavors, exactly what mixes of proteins and carbohydrates and sugars and all sorts of things that you get. And I think that if you are fully committed to this sort of weird art science that we call expedition travel, and in particular cold weather, polar Arctic travel, it's something that you probably should be at least slightly interested in. And I'm going to introduce you to a couple of little ideas which will save a lot of money. And most of these, I think I've done a rough costing on them, and I'll do a much more detailed one when voiceover Alex takes over in a bit. Some of these are truly, truly cheap. We're talking less than £1 a serving, and the servings are not stingy. So I'll talk you through a few of my initial ideas, and there will be 2 basic recipes in this introductory episode of Cooking with Alex. Let's open proceedings with a super basic classic of the high-calorie food world, macaroni cheese. And well notice, this is not a dried meal, it's tinned, and all the grimmer for it. This costs less than £1. It's not up to much. Insipid flavour and no texture you'd wish to remember. At less than 100 calories per 100 grams, which obviously takes the water content into account, it's terrible calorie density for carrying around or hauling. So that's our baseline, loyal people of the channel. The majority of dehydrated meals are unsurprisingly based around carbohydrates, normally pasta, rice and potato, and there's no need to deviate from that path. It makes a great deal of sense. The problem though is that the majority of pastas take quite a long time to cook. We're talking 8 minutes if you're lucky, and that's in boiling water, which is actively being simmered, not just boiling water that's been poured into a packet and is then going to cool down pretty quickly actually over the next 5-10 minutes or so. In fact, a lot of rices take 15-16 minutes to cook properly, and that's just a non-starter. The food's going to get cold, the rice won't actually plump up and rehydrate properly, you're onto a massive loser. And also, it's always going to be down to the size of the objects, and that's why when you open up most of these packet meals, you'll notice that all the lumps of meat, the lumps of vegetable, whatever's in there, they're normally very finely diced, and that's because, of course, the larger the item is, the longer it's going to take for the water to infiltrate and rehydrate it, which means, yes, some meals are a little bit less satisfying than they might be. If you're looking for a nice hunk of beef or a hunk of chicken or something, or a large bit of broccoli, you're going to be mostly disappointed, or just going to have to wait a lot longer for that otherwise crunchy piece of food to rehydrate and soften up. That's just part of the course, I'm afraid. So really, it's all about surface area, having the maximum amount of area around all of those bits of food ingredient, so that all that hot water, and it will just be hot water, not boiling water most of the time, can then leach its way in, rehydrate, and give you a meal. I'm sure most people have come across quick cook pasta. This looks pretty much like normal dried pasta, and it's supposed to cook in half the time. So this one says 5 minutes as opposed to 10-12 minutes. I've just had some, and I'll just show you some more in a second. It has the most revolting texture. I've tried them from different companies, from different supermarkets. The compromises that they've made to essentially part cook it and then re-dry it again, I suppose, it just ruins it. And it goes all fluffy and weird. It's just a horrible texture. And also, that 5 minutes does need to be boiling, simmering water. Otherwise, it will still be a little bit hard. And we're talking uncooked, not al dente. So let's put quick cook fusilli to the side. Then you might ask, how about those cheap ready-made dried packets from the supermarket? Normal pasta, but just smaller for speedier cooking, and mixed with powdered cheese, preservatives and flavouring. Let's find out. Again, we need to do a more realistic expedition heating procedure, which wouldn't allow for the food to dehydrate and cook in actively boiling or simmering water. Instead, the boiling water is poured and starts to cool immediately. Long and short is, no. Fail. By the time it cooled so far that it couldn't really be enjoyed as a hot meal, the pasta was still crunchy. Merely through intrigue, as strangely enough I've not seen a packable expedition microwave, I gave it a 30-second blast. This did render the meal edible, barely, but with that real artificial ready-made consistency. It's still a fail. We badly need a pasta solution. Something I found online, and I actually can't remember how I came across it, is this stuff. This is quick cook pasta again, but it's not made from durum wheat, which is, I guess, what most pasta is made from. Instead, this is made from, and it says 100% yellow peas. And I've come across pastas made from different things in the past, lentils and so on, but they normally still take a long time to cook. But this is from yellow peas, and what you end up with is a really high protein count. I'll do all of the actual numbers in voiceover and proper graphics. But just to give you a sense, this is 21% protein, and most of you know that protein on expeditions is super useful to get into your diet. And in fact, it's cheaper if that protein comes from something like your pasta, rather than paying for, I don't know, freeze-dried beef or something along those lines, or whey powder or some other kind of processed protein. So this is the kind of thing that might be interesting, and you think, well, maybe this is just going to take 5 minutes as well. They are claiming, they're claiming 2 minutes. I found it sort of 2 to 3 minutes, and you can absolutely, and I've definitely proven this, but I'll show you in a second, you can get away with doing this with just hot water. So we're talking not water that's being actively boiled over a stove, because when you're in a tent somewhere, you're very unlikely to have a pot of water open with steam pouring out and you're able to then pour in pasta and cook like you would at home. It's just not how things work. Generally, you boil the water and it comes straight out of either the pan or the kettle, straight into a flask or straight into a packet or straight into a vacuum mug or whatever it is that you're going to be using. And then at that point, it'll start to cool down. And if you're in a very cold tent, no matter how you insulate it, it's going to cool down fast. So it's very important that our food cooks quickly. These are the largest packs this pea pasta comes in, and I was an early adopter, so got a 40% off deal. This is obviously pricier than wheat pasta, but in practice we're still making major comparative savings. Then on goes the powder. This packet cheese sauce is stingy on cheese content to max out their profit, so you can instead use pure cheese powder of your choice and then play with quantities of flour, cheese or milk powder and then seasoning. You can also choose the ratio of pasta to sauce that you're after. Some people want pasta lightly covered in sauce and others pasta swimming in a cheesy lake. The latter will clearly be more calorie dense. Completely soft but not soggy. This is genuinely really good, and I'm not kidding. This genuinely tastes like mac and cheese. And there's all that protein in there without the expense of having to go down a meaty path. For appearance's sake, you could throw in a few dried herbs or even a few dried, diced or sliced vegetables. The next one I'll mention, I think most of you from North America, and I guess other parts of the world too, will be quite familiar with this already. We don't have this readily available in the UK, and I had to get this from like an American expat's website, is minute rice. And although it doesn't take exactly 1 minute to cook, you're still going to be getting it in, well, they say 5 minutes. I found it's pretty good in sort of 4 to 5 minutes. Again, even with non-actively simmered water. And that's at least twice as good as your typical rice. And I'm presuming this is the sort of rice that they do use in most of the packet meals anyhow. So it's, I think they call it parboiled rice, or I think they sort of cook it first and then they dry it again afterwards. I'm not entirely sure what the processing method is, but anyway, it gives you a bit of a head start when it comes to cooking your rice. And this can be a really good base for meals as well. So I guess it's the same principle in the same vein as our yellow pea pasta there, but this is actually genuine rice. It's not them trying to make rice out of some other sort of material, some other magic sorcery. Just to illustrate what we already know, good quality rice needs to be simmered for ages to cook properly. This comparison batch took over 20 minutes, and so completely out of the question in a tent when there's less than a cup's worth of stove fuel as ration per day. Instead, we're going full steam onward with this minute rice, a fairly standard serving, and then since we're going Thai in style and calorific in philosophy, we can go straight for the dried coconut. This is the choice, whether to use desiccated whole coconut powder, which offers more flavour, or dried coconut milk powder for the calories. This energy density is extraordinary, only oils and butter exceed it. You can of course use dried butter, real wet butter, or an oil of some variety to bulk up this meal. Then the spices and flavours based around lemongrass to give the zing and morale. There are 3 or 4 Thai-style soups and powdered spice packs in UK supermarkets. They are all similar and you can pick your favourite or even mix them. Most cost £1 per sachet or even cheaper. Mix it all up with some extra full-fat milk powder for luck and time for boiling water. The water quantity is again up to you. More water will hydrate faster and make mixing easier, plus if you yourself are dehydrated will provide a soupier meal. If you want to feel like you're eating a more filling, stodgier meal, which you often do, then fine. I've gone for the middling to watery end of the scale here, partly by accident. You soon get the hang of how much hot water is needed with each meal though. For this one I just had to mic myself back up again so I can talk about it in more detail. This is genuinely delicious, and this is a combination literally of some coconut, some Thai style flavouring from a packet, and some minute rice. Now of course, because the rice doesn't contain as much protein as that special pea pasta, it means you're going to have to, if you want to get the protein levels up, come up with some kind of addition, and the obvious solution would be freeze-dried chicken. So of course you can just add small chunks of diced dried chicken, and of course that will then have a very long shelf life as long as you add in normally either an oxygen absorber or a desiccant pack into your little setup. That said, if you're going straight out into the cold, it's all going to be completely frozen anyhow. You can crack on, or you could add a small amount of protein powder. But if you go too heavy on the protein powder, as those of you who have tried sort of cheap, nasty protein chocolate bars, sort of the health sports bars that just aren't very well designed or formulated, they can be a bit dry and powdery and a bit nasty. So you'd want to be a little bit careful if you're going to add straight up protein powder, either whey powder or pea protein powder, or whatever you want. But I would probably just use some chicken or animal protein in here, probably chicken I suspect. That's genuinely lovely. And you probably noticed that so far both these recipes are quite beige. That is a thing. And if you want to improve the visual pleasure of eating this, of course what you could do is get some freeze-dried red peppers, You could also use some dried herbs, and although it won't necessarily have that much of an effect on what's already quite a tasty meal, it'll just make it look that little bit extra colourful and alluring when you're cold and hopefully not wet, but certainly cold in a tent, having had a long day on the snow. So I'm actually going to finish this. The rest of them I've just been sort of tasting and doing them in small batches, but this is my dinner. Costs. This will obviously depend on your appetite and your daily calorie targets, but let's estimate how much these quite flexible recipes will cost you. I'll do UK prices, and I doubt it'll vary that much internationally. Macaroni cheese. 150 grams is a typical evening meal target for me. You'll find most packet meals are much lighter, meaning even less value for money. So the carb core is 100 grams, pasta, then the fat and more protein, a tasty mature powdered cheddar and butter for calories and consistency, and then 10 grams of flour or potato smash to give the soup a gloopiness. You probably wouldn't notice the extra weight of a few herbs and lumps of veggies to make it more appealing. Next, the Thai rice. I actually love the Thai rice from one of the commercial suppliers, so this is ambitious. Again, 2/3 carb base, then plenty of dense coconut excitement. Only 10 grams of the spice mix is needed as they are forceful in terms of taste. Butter and maybe dried milk for the right consistency, and we're done, unless you want to add freeze-dried meat of some sort. I thought I would share one more thing with you before I sign off and think about what other sorts of recipes I'm going to share with you in the following episodes. Now, it's fairly normal for people to simply take the top off their packet of food. There we are. Open it up, and inside is your food, and there's normally a little desiccant pack. That can come out, don't want to eat that. And then you can close it up again and reseal it. That's fairly standard. But of course, heat, once boiling water has been poured in there, heat is going to pour out of there. Normally the technique that you use in a cold tent, down at -20, -30, -40 degrees, to allow it to have time to actually cook, as it were, to rehydrate. What you then tend to do is stick it down your jacket, use your body warmth and also the insulation of your jacket to keep it warm, and then normally it survives until it's time to eat it. And it also keeps it from falling over, which is always a bit of a disaster. Now, that's all well and good, but if you've got 50 of these, 100 of these, they're quite a pain to pack and to sort of tessellate into bags. That's the first thing. But also, that's quite a waste of material. Now, they are, of course, I think they're normally mylar or foil backed packets, and so they're supposed to keep it fresh for as long as possible. But if you know that you're going to be eating your food within a few days or weeks, and particularly if you know it's going to be deep frozen that entire time, you don't actually need these. So what I tend to do is I decant these, and I can also then change the portion sizes, and I would decant them into just small little plastic bags which can fold down into absolutely nothing once they've been used up. And then you think, oh, how are you going to rehydrate it then? Where's your heat-proof container going to be? The answer, of course, is here. This is made by Thermos. I think it might be called the Big Boy vacuum flask or food flask. Anyway, it's the biggest one that they do, and it's got a top. It's then got a sealed top on the inside that you can pull out. There we are. That's the bit that actually creates the seal, so you can keep the smells and the hot air in there. I actually made this out of a little bit of composite material because the original lid was a bit heavy and unnecessary, so I made this myself. But anyhow, what I then do is I just empty the contents of one of these packets, which has been put into a smaller bag, pour it into here, in goes the water, that goes on top, and then I can sit that a couple of feet away from me in the tent. I don't have to actively keep it warm. I can leave it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long I want, and then I'll come back to it and it's still nice and hot inside. So yes, although this is an extra weight, you're going to be saving the weight of potentially dozens and dozens of these packets, and they do add up. And it means that you are a little bit more flexible about when you eat, and I think it tends to rehydrate the meals better. It's also just a bit nicer eating out of a container like this, as opposed to trying to use, where's my spoon? I've got my long spoon somewhere. 2 seconds. Oh, there it is. You have to use one of these extra long spoons generally anyway, so that you don't get food all over your gloves when you're eating. So that's fairly normal, but it's exactly the same principle with this. And it just feels slightly more civilized to be eating like this, as opposed to trying to sort of push into the corners of the packet. And we're not savages. We want to eat it in a slightly more pleasant manner. So what I'm now going to do is finish off, otherwise I'll start divulging far too many trade secrets to you on the first episode, and I will chat to you later on. In the comments, Leave me suggestions of recipes that you demand I make for you and come up with and perfect, and try and find you special tips to make them even more delicious than they would be otherwise. You can tell me how much you hate my ideas. You can tell me how talented a chef I am. And I think that's probably enough for now. I will definitely enjoy that sort of praise from you lot. Cheers. Talk to you later in the comments, and I will get back to you in the next episode. Bye.